Iran's military commander, Maji General Ali Abdullahi of the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, issued a statement today that said, and I want to give you the exact words because the exact words matter. Security in the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman is either for everyone or for no one. That was the official statement from Iran's armed forces and the Revolutionary Guards. And then he added, no port in the region will be safe. No port, not just Hormuz, not just Iranian ports. Every port, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, Kuwait City, Ras Tanura, which is Saudi Arabia's main oil export terminal, the single most important oil facility on earth. No port in the region will be safe. Here is the second thing. As of right now, today, April 15th, 2026, the United States has not formally responded to that statement. Not a press conference, not a counter threat, not an official military statement addressing it directly. The blockade is still running. The ceasefire is still technically in place. And Iran just threatened to expand the conflict from one strait to the entire Gulf and the Red Sea. And America has said nothing specific about it. Here is the third thing. And this is the part that I think connects everything and that almost nobody is putting together clearly. The reason Iran feels confident enough to make that threat, the reason a country that has had its supreme leader killed, its nuclear facilities bombed, its military infrastructure destroyed over 46 days of war, can stand in front of reporters and say no port in the region will be safe, is China. Not because China told Iran to say it, not because China is openly fighting alongside Iran, but because China has been doing something far more sophisticated and far more consequential than fighting. And understanding exactly what China has been doing is the key to understanding why this war has reached the point it has reached today. So let me walk you through all three of these things properly. Because when you see them together, Iran's threat, America's silence, and China's role, the picture that emerges is very different from what you are seeing in the headlines. Let me start with Iran's threat, because I think it has been underreported in a very specific way. The coverage has been treating it as a military threat. Iran is threatening to attack Gulf ports. And yes, it is that. But it is also a strategic communication, and understanding what Iran is communicating and to whom is more important than the military dimension alone. When Iran says no port in the region will be safe, Iran is not primarily talking to America. America already knows what Iran's capabilities are. America has been at war with Iran for 46 days. America knows about the missiles, the drones, the fast attack boats, the mines in the water. Iran threatening America militarily is not new information for Washington. Iran is talking to someone else. Iran is talking to Saudi Arabia, to the UAE, to Kuwait, to Qatar. Iran is talking to every Gulf state that has a port, a refinery, an oil terminal, a desalination plant, a financial district that depends on the global economy functioning normally. Iran is saying, if America's blockade continues, we will make this your problem too. Not just America's problem, your ports, your oil shipments, your economies. And that message lands differently for Gulf states than it does for Washington, because Gulf states are not party to this war. Saudi Arabia did not bomb Iran. The UAE did not bomb Iran. Qatar has American military bases on its soil, but has been desperate to stay out of the direct conflict. These countries have been watching this war with enormous anxiety, hoping it ends quickly, hoping it does not expand to them. And now Iran is publicly, officially, through its military chain of command, saying, if the blockade continues, we will expand it to you. The Saudi response to this is telling. The Wall Street Journal reported this week that Saudi Arabia is pressing Washington to abandon the blockade and return to negotiations, fearing the move could provoke Iran into retaliating against other critical shipping lanes. The country America started this war partly to protect. The country America has been telling the world it is defending by confronting Iran's regional aggression, is now asking America to stop what it is doing because it is making things worse for Saudi Arabia. That is an extraordinary reversal, and it is a direct result of Iran's threat to expand the conflict beyond Hormuz. Now let me tell you why Iran's threat is credible, because I think there is a temptation to dismiss it. Trump did in a sense, and he said Iran's navy is laying at the bottom of the sea, completely obliterated. But even Trump acknowledged in the same breath that Iran still has fast attack ships, and fast attack ships are exactly what you need to threaten ports and tankers in the Gulf. You do not need an aircraft carrier to blow up a tanker. You need a fast boat, a drone, or a missile. And Iran has all three in significant quantities. Mohsen Rezai, a military advisor and former Revolutionary Guard commander, was even more explicit. He wrote on social media that Iran's armed forces have major untouched levers to counter the blockade. Major, untouched, levers. That language is deliberate. He is not saying Iran has used everything and is running out of options. He is saying Iran has held things back. And the things Iran has held back, the capabilities it has not yet deployed, are now being placed on the table as a threat against every port in the region. And there is one more dimension to this threat that I think is critical. Iran is not just threatening Gulf ports. Iran is threatening the Red Sea. The Houthis in Yemen, who are Iran's most active proxy force in this conflict, have the capability to resume attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. They did it for more than a year during the Gaza conflict and effectively disrupted global shipping for months. If Iran signals to the Houthis that the ceasefire on Red Sea operations is over, if Houthi missiles start hitting tankers in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait simultaneously with Iranian operations in the Gulf, the global shipping disruption becomes not one choke point, but two, and two simultaneous choke points, one in the Persian Gulf and one in the Red Sea, affecting between 30 and 40% of global seaborne trade, would be an economic event with no modern precedent. Now let me address America's silence, because I want to be precise about what that silence means and what it does not mean. America's silence today on Iran's Gulf-wide threat is not confusion, it is not weakness, and it is not indifference. Let me tell you what I think it actually is. America is currently managing 5 things simultaneously. It is enforcing a naval blockade of Iranian ports with more than 10,000 personnel and over a dozen warships. It is navigating a ceasefire that expires in 6 days on April 21st. It is in indirect negotiations with Iran through intermediaries in Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, and Oman. It is preparing for a potential second round of direct talks that may or may not happen before the deadline. And it is watching China and Russia make strategic moves around the edges of this conflict in ways that complicate every American decision. In that context, formally responding to Iran's Gulf port threat creates a problem. If America responds with a counter threat, if Washington says officially that any Iranian action against Gulf ports will be met with further military escalation, America accelerates the confrontation at exactly the moment it is trying to create space for diplomacy. The blockade is already a pressure move. Adding a public military threat on top of the blockade in response to Iran's counter threat pushes both sides further down a path where neither can back down without losing face. But the silence also has a cost, because the silence creates uncertainty for Gulf states. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, they are watching the same thing you are watching. They see Iran threaten every port in the region. They see America say nothing specific about it. And they are asking, is America going to protect us if Iran acts on this threat? Or is America's focus so consumed by its direct confrontation with Iran over the nuclear question that our ports, our tankers, our oil terminals are secondary concerns? That uncertainty is precisely what Iran is trying to create. Iran's threat to Gulf ports is not primarily a military plan. It is a diplomatic wedge. Iran is trying to separate America from its Gulf allies by making those allies afraid and making America look unresponsive to that fear. If Saudi Arabia and the UAE start making separate deals with Iran to protect their own ports, if they start breaking from American policy to ensure their own security, America loses the coalition it needs to make the blockade economically effective. And Iran knows this. Iran has been playing this game, the game of splitting America from its regional partners, since the war began in February. Iran gave China, Russia, India, Iraq, and Pakistan permission to pass through the strait during the worst of the closure while blocking Western ships. That created exactly the kind of split Iran wanted. Countries choosing to deal with Iran directly rather than align fully with America's position. Now let me get to China, because this is the part that I think is genuinely underreported and genuinely important for understanding why Iran has the confidence to make the threat it made this morning. Let me start with a number. Before this war began in late February 2026, Iran was exporting approximately 1.68 million barrels of oil per day. In March, the month when the war was at its most intense, when Hormuz was largely closed, when the world was watching oil prices spike, Iran exported 1.84 million barrels per day, more than before the war. In April, so far, Iran has been shipping 1.71 million barrels per day, again, above the pre-war average. How is that possible? How is a country under American military assault, with its supreme leader killed, its nuclear facilities bombed, its air defenses destroyed, somehow exporting more oil during the war than it was before? The answer is China. And the answer involves a system that China built specifically to survive exactly this kind of American pressure. China has been buying Iranian oil since the sanctions years, when Western companies were forbidden from touching Iranian crude. China paid in yuan, not dollars. China used second-tier Chinese banks that operate outside the SWIFT financial network that Western sanctions rely on. China used what analysts call dark fleet tankers, ships that switch off their automatic identification systems to avoid detection, sail without broadcasting their location, and deliver their cargo to Chinese refineries called teapots that process sanctioned oil without asking too many questions. China stored Iranian crude in bonded warehouses and floating storage facilities across Asian waters. And China built the relationship over a decade specifically so that when a moment like this came, when America tried to cut Iran off from its oil revenues, the system would hold, and the system has held. 11.7 million barrels of Iranian crude have moved to China since the war began on February 28th, according to tanker tracking services that use satellite imagery to follow dark fleet vessels that have turned off their transponders. Iran is still getting paid. Iran's oil revenues are still flowing. And the blockade that Trump announced on Monday, while it has created pressure on Iran's port operations, cannot stop the China-Iran oil trade because that trade was specifically engineered to be unreachable by American enforcement tools. Now, here is where China's role in Iran's confidence becomes direct. I said earlier that China is the reason Iran feels safe enough to threaten every port in the Gulf. Let me explain exactly what I mean by that. Iran's threat to Gulf ports is a credible threat only if Iran believes it can survive the consequences of acting on it. If Iran blows up a tanker in Dubai's waters or hits a port facility in Qatar, America will escalate. America will strike harder, and Iran needs to believe it can absorb that escalation without collapsing economically. The reason Iran believes it can is that China is still buying its oil. As long as China is buying Iranian oil through the dark fleet system, as long as Iran has a revenue stream that bypasses the blockade, Iran has the economic oxygen to sustain its position. The blockade hurts Iran. It hurts significantly, but it does not produce the kind of immediate economic collapse that would force Iran to capitulate on its core demands, because China has ensured that Iran retains a lifeline. And U.S. intelligence this week confirmed something even more direct about China's role. CNN reported that U.S. intelligence indicates China is preparing to send weapons to Iran, specifically shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missile systems known as manpads. These are exactly the kinds of weapons that shot down a U.S. F-15E over Iran on April 3rd. China is reportedly routing these shipments through third countries to mask their origin. And when Trump was asked about this at the White House, he said he doubted it. His own intelligence agencies confirmed it. His own president doubted it. That gap between what America's intelligence community knows and what America's president is willing to say publicly is its own kind of silence. And it is a silence China is counting on. I want to use a framework here that I call the confidence ladder, because I think it explains why Iran escalated this morning from threatening Hormuz to threatening every port in the entire region. And I think understanding the confidence ladder is essential to understanding where this goes in the next 6 days before the ceasefire expires. The confidence ladder works like this. Every time Iran makes a threat and America does not directly punish that threat, Iran gains a rung on the ladder. Every time Iran tests a boundary and the consequences are manageable, Iran's confidence to test the next boundary increases. Look at the sequence. Iran closed Hormuz in February. America spent weeks trying to reopen it. It could not fully reopen it. Iran kept the toll system running. Iran gave China and friendly nations permission to pass while blocking Western ships. America threatened escalation repeatedly. The blockade was not forced open. Then Iran allowed a ceasefire, but immediately started violating it in Lebanon and restricting ships in the strait again. America launched a blockade, but within 24 hours, a Chinese sanctioned tanker sailed through it, and America's military said that tanker was not in violation of blockade terms. Iran watched that happen. Now Iran is threatening every port in the region. It is not because Iran has more military capability than it had a week ago. Iran's military has been degraded significantly. It is because Iran's confidence that it can escalate without facing consequences that it cannot absorb has been building rung by rung. And the rungs of that ladder are built partly from China's support. Every barrel of oil China buys from Iran is a rung on the confidence ladder. Every weapon system China prepares to ship to Iran is a rung. Every time China's tankers sail through America's blockade without consequence, that is a rung. Every time China calls the blockade dangerous and irresponsible, and America does not formally confront China about its role in sustaining Iran's position, that is a rung. Iran threatened every Gulf port this morning from a position of confidence, not military superiority. Iran does not have military superiority, but strategic confidence. The confidence that it has a partner in China that will continue to buy its oil, potentially supply its weapons, block diplomatic consensus against it in international forums, and publicly criticize American actions while doing all of the above quietly. That combination of support is what allows a country that has been bombed for 46 days to stand up and say, no port in the region will be safe. Now, I want to address what I think is the most important question that this morning's events raise. And it is a question that nobody in the mainstream coverage is asking directly. If China is the reason Iran can make this threat, if China's oil purchases, China's weapons pipeline, China's diplomatic cover, and China's dark fleet tankers are collectively giving Iran the economic and strategic confidence to escalate rather than concede, then the question is, what is America going to do about China's role specifically? Trump threatened a 50% tariff on China if it transfers weapons to Iran. He made that threat while simultaneously saying he doubted China was doing it. You cannot credibly threaten a consequence for something you publicly say you do not believe is happening. China heard that. Iran heard that. Everyone heard that. The broader question is whether America's strategy for ending this war has a China component at all. The blockade targets Iran. The negotiations target Iran. The ceasefire framework targets Iran. But the reason Iran has been able to hold its position for 46 days, the reason Iran's oil revenues kept flowing, the reason Iran's weapons pipelines kept moving, the reason Iran could sit in Islamabad for 21 hours and walk away without a deal is not purely Iranian resilience. It is Chinese support. A strategy that does not address Chinese support is a strategy that is trying to win a game while ignoring one of the players. And that player, China, is not a passive observer. China pressed Iran to accept the ceasefire, according to Britannica's April 15th reporting. China is in daily diplomatic contact with both sides. China is buying Iranian oil. China is reportedly preparing to arm Iran. China met with Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov this week, and Putin is planning to visit China in the weeks around Trump's own planned visit to Beijing in May. Russia and China are coordinating their positions on this war at the highest diplomatic levels, and America is treating them as spectators. Let me close with what I think the next 48 to 72 hours will tell us. Because the ceasefire expires in 6 days, and the sequence of events between now and April 21st will determine not just whether this particular war ends, but what kind of Middle East emerges from it. If America responds to Iran's Gulf port threat with a formal, direct counter-statement, one that specifically addresses what America will do if Iran acts against Saudi or UAE or Qatari ports, that tells you America is choosing escalation. That it is betting the blockade plus military pressure will force Iran to the table before April 21st. If America stays silent on the Gulf port threat while quietly pursuing back-channel talks, which is the current pattern, that tells you America is still trying to find a diplomatic path, that it is absorbing Iran's threats as negotiating pressure rather than responding in kind. And if America starts engaging China directly on its role, if Rubio's meetings this week or the planned Trump-Xi summit in May include real pressure on Chinese weapons transfers and oil purchases as part of the Iran negotiation, then you are watching something that has not happened yet in this conflict. America treating this as a US-Iran-China problem rather than just a US-Iran problem. I do not know which of those three paths America is on right now. I do not think anyone outside a very small room in Washington knows. What I do know is that Iran's threat this morning was not random. It was a calculated escalation from a country that has just spent 46 days learning exactly how far it can push before America pushes back decisively. And the answer it has learned, rung by rung on the confidence ladder, is further than most people thought possible at the start of this war. Watch what America says today, not on Truth Social, in the State Department briefing, in CENTCOM statements, in whatever back-channel signals reach Pakistan and Turkey and Egypt, the countries that are right now shuttle diplomating between Washington and Tehran, trying to find language for a second round of talks before April 21st. And watch what China says, or does not say. Because China's silence on its own role in this conflict has been just as loud and just as deliberate as America's silence on Iran's Gulf port threat this morning. 2 silences, 2 calculations, 6 days left, and a ceasefire that was always fragile, holding together by threads that Iran just pulled on very hard. Push back on this if you see it differently. Look at the Khatam al-Anbiya statement. Look at the dark fleet tanker numbers. Look at what CNN reported about Chinese weapons transfers. Look at what Trump said about doubting his own intelligence. The facts are all in the open. And when you put them together, Iran's threat this morning is not the story. The story is the system that made Iran confident enough to make it. Because here's the thing about systems. They do not announce themselves. They do not hold press conferences. They do not post on Truth Social. They simply work quietly, consistently, rung by rung. And the system that China has been building around Iran, the oil payments, the dark fleet, the weapons pipeline, the diplomatic cover, has been working for years. This war did not create it. This war just made it visible. And what Iran did this morning, threatening every port from the Gulf to the Red Sea, is what that system looks like when it is fully operational. That is the real story of April 15th, 2026.
Every port in the Persian Gulf just received a warning from Iran, not a diplomatic note, not a carefully worded statement issued through back channels. A direct operational military threat, the Persian Gulf, the Sea of Oman, and the Red Sea all designated as potential combat zones if the United States does not lift its naval blockade. Of Iranian ports, Kuwait's refineries burned, Qatar's LNG terminal was struck, Abu Dhabi absorbed missiles, Saudi Arabia intercepted an Iranian ballistic missile aimed at its backup export port, and the United States, the nation currently running a naval blockade in the Gulf, has not stopped any of it. The question every strategic analyst in Washington and every defense ministry across the Middle East is asking right now is not whether Iran has the capability to do this. It already demonstrated that it does. The real question is why Iran still has that capability at all. And the answer to that question has one name: China. Let's establish the operational picture. First, because the scale of what Iran is threatening is not being communicated clearly in most coverage. Iran's armed forces have formally warned they could block marine traffic in the Persian Gulf, the Sea of Oman, and the Red Sea if the United States continues its blockade and creates insecurity for Iranian commercial ships and oil tankers. This is not a posture. This is a declared operational intention from a military that has already demonstrated its reach across multiple Gulf states simultaneously. The Way reported intercepting 7 Iranian missiles and 15 drones in a single day, and since the war began, a total of 349 missiles and over 1,700 drones. Read that number again, 349 missiles, 1,700 drones, from a military the administration has repeatedly described as destroyed. Now ask the only question that matters analytically: where is the money coming from? Where are the components coming from? What is keeping this war machine operational under the weight of the most severe sanctions regime ever imposed on any country in modern history? The answer requires you to understand a financial architecture that has been quietly constructed over the past 5 years, specifically designed to make American sanctions structurally irrelevant. After Western sanctions cut Tehran off from most international buyers and global financial systems, Iran found a willing buyer in China, the world's largest crude importer. Beijing formalized this relationship in 2021 with a 25-year, $400 billion cooperation agreement, securing a discounted Iranian oil supply in exchange for investment across Iran's energy, banking, and infrastructure sectors. That agreement is not a trade deal in the conventional sense. It is a sanctions bypass architecture embedded inside a legitimate bilateral framework, and it is what has been funding everything you are watching unfold in the Persian Gulf right now: Chinese purchases account for roughly 90% of Iran's exported oil, providing tens of billions of dollars in annual revenue that supports Iran's government budget and military activities. 90%. The IRG does not operate on goodwill. Proxy networks do not run on ideology alone. Drone factories require raw materials, supply chains, engineers, and payroll. Every missile that intercepted a Saudi tanker, every drone that reached Qatari infrastructure, every warhead aimed at Kuwaiti refineries, each one was ultimately made possible by a barrel of Iranian crude sold to a Chinese refinery. Now let's examine the mechanism, because this is where the strategic picture becomes genuinely complex. China's major state-owned refineries stepped back from buying Iranian crude after US sanctions designations. The gap was filled by so-called teapot refineries, small independent facilities clustered in Shandong province, which by 2025 accounted for an estimated 90% of Iran's oil exports to China. This arrangement gave Beijing something invaluable: plausible deniability. The Chinese state is not officially buying sanctioned Iranian oil. Independent refineries are, except those refineries are not fully independent. Beneath their private ownership structures, these refineries connect closely to the Chinese state through joint ventures, partnerships with state-owned enterprises, and government-linked customers. The architecture is elegant in its design. The money flows, Tehran receives revenue, the IRG receives funding, the drones get built, and Beijing maintains the legal posture of a neutral party calling for peace, while its refinery network processes the crude that pays for the war, with the IRG controlling up to around 50% of Iran's oil export revenues. That revenue stream is effectively funding its military operations and regional proxies. Now understand what China actually gets out of this arrangement beyond discounted crude. Iran and China signed a 25-year cooperation agreement in 2021, securing $400 billion worth of oil at below-market prices in exchange for investment in Iran's infrastructure and security cooperation. The discount structure matters. Strategically, Shandong's independent refineries, which process 90% of Iranian oil reaching China, depend on below-market prices. Replacement barrels would cost $10 to $12 more per barrel. This means the arrangement is not merely politically convenient for Beijing, it is economically load-bearing. China has built a cost structure in its refining sector that requires cheap Iranian crude to remain viable. Walking away from Iranian oil is not simply a diplomatic decision. It is a structural economic adjustment that Beijing has no current appetite to make. Throughout this war, China has sought to position itself as an outwardly neutral party while maintaining its relationship with Iran, whose oil it heavily depends on. US intelligence indicates that Beijing is preparing to deliver new air defense systems to Iran within the next few weeks. That intelligence, if accurate, represents a strategic escalation that goes well beyond the oil trade. Air defense systems delivered to Iran would directly complicate any future US or Israeli strike package. They extend the operational lifespan of the Iranian military architecture that is currently threatening every Gulf port on the map, and they would arrive wrapped in the same language of neutrality that has defined Beijing's public posture throughout this entire conflict. After weeks playing a quiet role in the conflict, Beijing made its most significant public intervention as it faces growing pressure to use its influence on Tehran to help end the war. Xi Jinping warned against a return to the law of the jungle, saying international rule of law must be safeguarded and must not be selectively applied. That statement is not a peace initiative. That is a geopolitical claim. Xi is asserting that the American naval blockade, not Iran's threat to close the world's most critical waterway, is the primary violation of international order. He is framing Chinese support for Iranian continuity as a principled defense of multilateral norms, and he is doing it precisely because the blockade directly threatens Chinese interests. As the main importer of Iranian oil, China is the country that stands to be most impacted by US moves affecting its flow, both when the White House removed certain sanctions on Iranian barrels and now as the US military launches a blockade of Iranian ports. Now let's examine what the blockade has actually revealed about the limits of American leverage. The blockade does not need to stop every barrel. It needs to make the cost of continuing the trade higher than the cost of stopping it. But no allied nation has supported the blockade that diplomatic isolation matters operationally, a blockade. Enforced by one navy against a shadow fleet that has been operating for years without allied participation, without interception protocols agreed upon multilaterally, is a blockade with structural gaps. A Chinese-owned tanker called the MV Rich Starry, flying a Malawian flag, an interesting choice for a landlocked country with its AIS transponder having spoofed its position for 11 days, attempted to transit the strait carrying roughly 250,000 barrels of methanol. It turned back. Then, in the early hours of the following day, it tried again and slipped through. That single tanker tells the story of this blockade better than any Pentagon briefing. Here is the strategic reality that Washington has not yet publicly confronted. The instrument it is using, financial and military pressure, is specifically designed to coerce states that depend on access to dollar-denominated systems and American-aligned trade networks. Iran does not meaningfully depend on either of those systems. Anymore, China has built a sanctions evasion economy. The shadow system would not exist if Beijing and Tehran had not made a strategic decision to allow it from oil to finance. The American sanctions architecture was built for a world where the dollar was the only viable settlement currency for international energy trade. China and Iran have spent 5 years methodically building a parallel system that operates outside that architecture. The blockade is applying pressure to an economy that has already adapted to pressure, and the entity that could actually apply decisive economic coercion to Iran is the one entity Washington cannot directly control: Beijing. Washington is banking on China using its leverage as Iran's sole meaningful customer to pressure Tehran toward a deal. China can absorb the loss and buy replacement crude, but the switch carries real cost, or China can use its influence to push Iran toward a negotiated solution. Every warship in the strait is there to make a single phone line ring, the one between Beijing and Tehran. That is an accurate framing of the endgame calculation, but it contains an assumption that may not hold. It assumes China's interests align with an outcome that satisfies Washington. They do not necessarily. China has been balancing its interests in its diplomatic rhetoric, backing Iran and opposing us and Israeli attacks on it, while also calling for the security of Gulf states to be respected. Beijing wants the war to end, but on terms that preserve its relationship with Tehran, maintain discounted Iranian crude, and demonstrate that American unilateral pressure has limits. Those are not the same terms Washington wants. 3 outcomes are now structurally possible. The first: Beijing applies genuine pressure to Tehran. Iran accepts a negotiated framework, the blockade ends, and oil flows resume. This is the outcome Washington is engineering for. It requires China to sacrifice short-term relationship capital with Iran and medium-term economic advantages from discounted crude. Beijing will extract a significant price for that cooperation, likely in the form of trade concessions, tariff rollbacks, or Taiwan-adjacent security arrangements. The second: the shadow fleet continues probing the blockade. China absorbs the cost through its strategic reserves, and the standoff extends until one side's political will breaks first. China holds 1.3 billion barrels in strategic reserves, roughly 120 days of supply. That timeline gives Beijing significant runway before facing genuine shortage pressure. The third: Iran escalates to the infrastructure targets that have been assessed but not yet struck. Desalination plants, water systems, the threshold that, once crossed, reshapes every alliance calculation in the Gulf and potentially draws additional regional actors into direct confrontation. That scenario does not serve Chinese interests, and Beijing has been quietly signaling to Tehran that those targets are out of bounds. Beijing urged Iranian counterparts not to target oil and liquefied natural gas tankers transiting the waterway and to refrain from striking key export hubs, such as Qatar. What you are watching is not simply a military confrontation between the United States and Iran. You are watching a structural test of the post-1973 global order, the architecture under which American financial dominance, the petrodollar system, and forward military presence in the Gulf have functioned as mutually reinforcing instruments of power. Iran is not defeating that system militarily. It is demonstrating that the system has gaps, that those gaps have been deliberately engineered by a patient competitor, and that filling those gaps requires either Chinese cooperation or a direct confrontation with Chinese interests that no administration has been willing to initiate. The Gulf ports Iran has threatened are connected to the global energy system. That system is connected to Chinese supply chains. Those supply chains are connected to American consumer goods, American technology imports, and the treasury market that finances American debt. Pull any thread in this system hard enough, and you do not get a clean break. You get cascading structural stress. That is precisely the leverage Iran is holding, and it holds that leverage because Beijing decided 5 years ago that it was more valuable to own it than to let Washington extinguish it.